Today on Locked On Canadiens, a special crossover edition. That was certainly a game that happened. There's not a whole lot that's fun about it, but what I decided to do was have a fun co-host. So we're going to talk about the game. We're going to talk about each other's teams and rebuilds with the wonderful JD Young of Locked On Sharks on today's Locked On Canadiens.
Are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 736 of Locked On Canadiens. And thank you for making us your first listen of the day, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick, and today I am joined for a special crossover by the wonderful JD Young of Locked On Sharks. Because here's the thing, I knew Scott was going to be away, and I knew this game was going to be awful. It was going to be terrible. So I was like, how do I make this episode fun? And our dear friend JD, who's always standing up for us and always there for us, agreed to come in and take Scott's place today. And the game was actually worse than I expected it to be. How are you doing today?
I've been in prepping. I've been chugging Monster energy drinks all day just to try to, mimic Scott as much as I possibly can. But alas, it's not working. So yeah.
And then you drove directly into a snowstorm in a state of emergency.
Yes, because all the snow I have here, it's definitely an issue with that. So.
All right, so let's talk about this game. As much as I don't want to, I think it's important to kind of I'm sorry, I don't. It was 4-0. The Canadiens couldn't get anything going. They had like roughly 4 million power plays awarded to them, and they couldn't make anything happen. But I'm curious about the Sharks because this is the thing. Like, we're friends. We talk about this every day. And the impression that I had was that the Sharks were literally the worst team in the league. And I have to say, for stretches, I believed you guys, but they do have sneaky offensive skills. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how that's been going? Because as a Canadiens fan, I think honestly, like, it's weird because they're trying for a new draft pick, but like every time I look at the Sharks, I feel like can't relate.
Yeah, I mean, for the Sharks, it's weird because they have been offensively kind of better than I expected this year, and that's been mainly because of their top guys like Erik Karlsson, Tomas Hertl, Timo Meier, Logan Couture. These guys have been driving the offense for them, and they haven't been getting too much secondary scoring. But when Logan Couture's got 13 goals this season, which I didn't expect to see coming this early in the season. Erik Karlsson's got 12. Tomas Hertl's got like 7 now. Then Timo Meier has 12. They've been making up the bulk of the offense. What's been the issue for the Sharks is the goaltending and everything on the blue line, not named Erik Karlsson. And so they've actually been getting into a lot of fun, high-scoring games for the most part. But tonight's game was Kaapo Kahkonen's easily his best performance until his first shutout since the Sharks acquired him. And he's been kind of an issue for the Sharks all season, and they've been having to rely on James Reimer night in and night out. And Kaapo Kahkonen, every time he's out there, he's been giving out soft goals, just not looked himself. But tonight, he looks great for some reason against the Canadiens.
And Jake Allen really did not. I mean, admittedly, the rhythm of that game was very weird. There was a 19-minute stretch across 2 periods during which Jake Allen saw no shots.
Sharks hockey.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Like, sometimes it's like, I believe you when you say they're as bad as they say you are, and then sometimes it's like, well, they just skated circles around some guy in red. So I think with Jake Allen, he's played above his level for I would say the first half of his starts, and then he's come crashing back to earth. And he did recently have a child, like he's got a newborn at home and stuff like that. Like, I'm confident that he can find his game again, but I think that he's really struggling right now. He's having that slump. So that's definitely something that cost the Canadiens, but also the power play. I mean, JD, I need to ask you, have you seen such a bad power play in your years of watching hockey?
Yes, have
How
you
bad
watched
is it?
the Ducks power play? It is worse than this. I've the
It's
Ducks
worse?
the Ducks power play is the worst part. I mean, the Sharks penalty kill it's elite. It's the best in the NHL, and it's been good for the past couple of years. That's one of the few things that has carried over from the Bob Bugner era to the David Quinn era. The Sharks penalty kill is really good, and they play a very aggressive style. They try to make whoever the puck carrier, they try to make them kind of think on their feet before and not get too settled. And they've been great with that style. But no, this isn't the worst. When you guys play the Ducks, that power play, it does not make sense, especially when you have Trevor Zegras on the ice. Like that power play is god awful.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like in Montreal,
Yeah.
you've got Nick Suzuki, you've got Cole Caufield, you've got even Slavkovsky. I think he counts.
Yeah.
He's their first overall pick, and they can't make things happen. And the thing that I think is really interesting about what you said, like if like literally 4 minutes ago you said every one of their blue line not named Erik Karlsson isn't good, and then you turn around and their penalty kill is really good. So I do feel like there's a way to kind of utilize players where like you really really put them in positions of their strength even if they're not good at literally anything else. I think it's really, it's a really interesting way. So I feel like coaching in itself, like I think coaching can kind of cover up a lot of ills. So I'm going to ask you this before we turn it over to our next segment about rebuilding. What has the David Quinn era been like so far? I mean, I know the Sharks don't have the most elite of personnel on the ice. What about behind the bench? How's it been so far?
I've actually been pleasantly surprised with David Quinn, and there was a lot of hullabaloo about when they hired him, especially with his time with the Rangers and how he handled young players and benching and not putting these guys in positions to succeed. But you've seen, I mean, the Sharks, they are. We'll talk about this in a rebuild, but they are going a very very slow approach with their young guys and making them kind of earn it. But so we haven't had to really kind of deal with that yet, So guys like William Eklund and Thomas Bordeleau haven't even sniffed the NHL this season. But what he's done with the kind of the veterans, I think he's brought some life into them and brought a new system, right? And the Sharks power play, David Quinn can coach up a power play. You saw that with his time with the Rangers, where their kind of formula was we're going to hang in there at 5-on-5, but our special teams are going to beat you. And you're kind of seeing that again with the Sharks, right? Where 5-on-5, you might get caved in, but our special teams are going to beat your special teams. I know the Sharks didn't score on the power play tonight, but their power play I thought looked a lot better than the Canadiens power play. And the Sharks power play is actually in the month of November heading into this game was actually the 8th best power play in the entire NHL just in the month of November. So you can see his influence there. And again, they
Can he
have.
come and fix ours?
Do you like your children to play? That's the one question that you have to ask
We do,
yourself.
and we are going to get that in a second. But let me let you finish your thought.
Yeah, so he's brought some new life to it. And I think that what he did was he figured out who his 5 guys are. So you have Erik Karlsson, you have Tomas Hertl, Timo Meier, Logan Couture, and then Alexander Barabanov. And he says, you guys just go out there and cook for 90 seconds or 2 minutes. If Erik Karlsson, you want to play the full 2 minutes, if the power play's cooking, go out there and play. And I think that's what he's done is allowed these guys to kind of trust each other, especially these guys who've been playing together for such a long time. Out of that group, Barabanov's the newest guy, and he's been here for 2 seasons, right? These guys have all played with each other for a long time. And he's just allowing these guys to go out there. They're your best players, and he puts them in a position to go out there and just try to score a goal. And they've been very good at that so far this year.
And honestly, it's fun to see things work out like that, like where you trust players and they make the right decisions. So we're going to talk a little bit about equipping your players in order to be able to trust them when your team trends towards becoming a contender. Because as we know, the Sharks are in a rebuild, the Canadiens are in a rebuild. We're going to compare that, and we're going to talk a little bit about some rebuilds that might not have gone as well as we like fans would have wanted. It's going as well as I wanted to, and that's all coming up in just one moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. It's literally all there. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. I mean, the World Cup is going on right now. Like that's definitely worth checking out. And if you love sports podcasts, which I know you do because you're listening to this one, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So you can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And let's start this game. Well, I mean, let's start talking about the rebuild because I know JD, in preparation for this game, you compared the Sharks rebuild and the Habs rebuild, and you did that, and I want to like kind of discuss that a little bit because the last time we had you on, it was like, what do we expect when we know our team is going to be bad? And our team has been better than we expected, right? Whereas like you said that you said that you bet that the Sharks would finish lower in the rankings, lower in the standings than the Canadiens would. And so far, that bet is looking pretty good.
Yes. As of tonight, though, a little worried about, but I'm still feeling pretty good about that one. Yes. So
I mean, you're not going to play the Canadiens power play every night. So.
No, we have the Ducks still coming up some more. So yes, that's fine.
So let's talk a little bit about this because you made a really interesting point before we started recording, and I want to kind of bring in our neighbors across the Outaouais and the Ottawa Senators, right? It's interesting because we talked about their offseason, we talked about, the value in what they did with their young players, and here they are not winning games. I repeat, the Ottawa Senators do not win games. So
they did lose to the Sharks, so that is.
So what in your mind, I think you made a really interesting observation, so I don't want to take your point away from you, but let's talk a little bit about how this is going and the lessons that our teams can learn from what the Ottawa Senators did not do right.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's early to say that they didn't do it right. I mean, because that team is very loaded with talent. You look at Tim Stützle, who might be the best player in that class, right? They traded for Alex DeBrincat. They got Josh Norris, RIP, from the Sharks, and the Erik Karlsson. I think they went about it the right way and trying to acquire as much talent as possible. And they let their kids run free, and that's fine. But you wonder if now they're struggling to, kind of learn to win games and going from rebuilding to trying to contend right away without having some veterans around to show you, hey, this is the way you do things type of things. Right. And, we'll talk about the Canadiens and the Sharks version of how they're kind of doing this too. But you look at it right now that the Sens team is struggling, they lack kind of cohesion. Everyone just kind of seems to be doing their own thing. They played the Sharks a couple, last week, and that game wasn't even close. I mean, the Sharks just ran circles around around the Sens, and you wonder they just don't have a guy. I mean, I know Claude Giroux is there, but he just got there 2 months ago. They don't have a guy who can kind of set the culture and be like, okay, guys, this is how you win games and kind of learn how to win games. And guys who've been there before, maybe guys who've been through the playoffs and kind of all that stuff. They don't have that guy who's been around for them for a while. And what I think is interesting about the Canadiens is you kind of have a nice mixture, right? You have your first line guys who are established, right? Your Cole Caufield, Nick Suzuki, Kirby Dach. Those are going to be your next core for the next hopefully 10 plus years, right? But you still have a lot of guys who on the team who've kind of been through it, right? Josh Anderson, I know we love Josh Anderson on this podcast, but he went through a Stanley Cup final, and I know some of these young guys, but they've been around a little bit and they've played meaningful hockey games, and
like Edmondson, right? Edmondson's a great example.
They've been around. They know what they're doing, right? And no moment is going to be too big for those guys. So when expectations start to rise for the Canadiens here, hopefully next year, all these guys kind of start to make that next leap. Slafkovsky, his second year, he kind of makes that, expect to make a big jump next year. You have, Caufield, who now actually has a coach who puts him in a right position to succeed. You expect, they have guys that they can turn to when maybe things aren't going well, right? We know Cole Caufield, potential 40, 50 goal scorer, but he's going to have slumps where, 5-6 games, I haven't found the back of the net. Cool. I have somebody to turn to. I can talk to. Okay, what do I do? Type of thing. So, and with the Sharks, they're going a slow as molasses type of situation, right? Mike Greer, he made a point to go out and fill the bottom six with a bunch of just NHL guys. Nobody to write home about, Luke Kunin, Oscar Lindblom, Nico Sturm. These guys have been around for a couple of years, right? William Eklund, Thomas Bordeleau, like Tristen Robins, kind of their picks. Go play in the AHL, and then when you are ready to take a job, you can come take a job. So I'm just curious to see how these three kind of rebuilds, how they kind of their ends come together here, I guess is the best. I don't know the best way to put it, but yeah, how do they turn out, right?
Right, absolutely. And the thing is that obviously I'm taking shots at Ottawa gratuitously because I
I'm
am
trying
who
to be
I am.
nice, so yes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes.
But it's true that they are loaded with talent. That's the thing. So like most of the time when you've got that much talent and you don't have the results, there's a couple of things. And the Canadians saw that last year. They saw both things happen. And I think the Ottawa Senators are finding it. And again, like last year's Canadians were nowhere near as talented as, some of these guys in Ottawa right now. But there's a vacuum, a leadership vacuum, that veteran presence that you talked about. There is a vacuum. And I think it's really interesting because you and I both are very numbers minded. We're both analytics people.
Yes.
But this is something that is undeniable, that lack of leadership is definitely missing. And when you have lack of leadership and also lack of good coaching, like that's a huge problem. Like I don't think the Senators coaching is good. Like it's literally like I don't understand why he hasn't been fired yet, right? But in terms of Montreal, like last year, they lacked that leadership, they lacked that coaching, and then they switched out the coaching, and the coaching in that interim brought that leadership that was missing. Like that void was filled by Martin St. Louis, and I think it's very interesting that you say, like the Canadians have like a bit of a mix. Obviously, everybody in this market wants all the veterans traded for good young stars, but you can't rush that, right? You do need people to kind of shepherd it, right? Like people talk about every time we criticize David Savard, people talk about, he's there to kind of shepherd Kaiden Guhle, which I don't disagree with, right? Kaiden Guhle is a star. Like he's going to be...
I cannot wait to watch Kaiden Guhle in a couple of years. He's going to be amazing, right? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like he's awesome. And so, yes, he does need somebody to kind of, because he did everything on his part, right? Like Kaiden Guhle did all of the things he needed to do to make the NHL, right? Now the Canadians need to do all the things to make him comfortable in the NHL and for him to achieve his potential. Like I'm totally blown away by how well he does. But like you can easily mismanage an asset like that. Somebody like Kirby Dach, for example, which I know we're going to talk a little bit in our third segment, but the Canadians really found that coaching. They found that, and so that's why I was very curious about the David Quinn era, because very much I feel like it's like you said, like the Sharks are going as slow as molasses, and they do have some players in the pipeline that I know you're excited about because
so
you
much.
talk about it all the time, and I'm excited to watch them too. Like you mentioned, like Eklund, Bordeleau, Robins. Like, so what in your mind do you think when in your mind do you think the Sharks can kind of speed it up a little bit and start playing those guys more days in the NHL?
I think it'll be the trade deadline because the Sharks will be active sellers at the trade deadline, right? And it'll be interesting because a lot of these pieces like Nick Bonino, Matt Nieto, guys like that who are, on the last year of your deals. And you talked about earlier, the guys who kind of make sense they have a role, right? And we talked about the Sharks penalty kill. Those are the reason why the Sharks penalty kill is really good. Those guys are very good as defensive forwards. Nick Bonino blocked, I think, a bajillion shots tonight. Checking the stats, he blocked a bajillion shots. Matt Nieto, kind of same thing. Like those guys can help a team go win a championship. We saw that last year with Andrew Cogliano getting traded to the Avalanche. Go out there, help kind of support their penalty kill. Good locker room guy, all that fun stuff. But again, the Sharks, though, their big issue before was they were such a kind of top heavy, and not that their cap's gotten much better, but they were such a top heavy team where you'd have to kind of try to fill the holes and fill the roster by either asking young players to kind of step into roles that they weren't ready for, or go out and find as cheap as talent as possible. And they usually went with the young players, but when you were good for a long time, humble brag, you don't have a lot of good pipeline. Like you're trying to trade away picks to win the Stanley Cup.
Right, that's the price you pay, right?
That's the price you pay, right?
To win or to contend.
And if the Sharks had won a Stanley Cup, who cares, right? You can always look to that ring or look to the banner and and be like, who it doesn't matter right now. I can look at that and and unfortunately they never got there or never won it. But that this is the price that you have to pay for that. So and I of course I want to watch Eklund and I want to watch Bordeleau and I want to watch these guys on the NHL, and I have to remind myself that you need to be patient with this, and I think the Sharks are going to have those pieces, right? You're going to have Couture is probably going to be around here. He's still going to be here for a while. Tomas Hertl, who's beloved in the locker room, an alternate captain, he's going to be here for the next 8 years, right? Erik Karlsson, hopefully, is going to be here for the next, 4+ years. Like, you have guys so that can help these young guys when they get in. And then like all those guys, they have seen it all. They've done it all. Those guys have played in monster games. They've played in, a lot of these guys have played in Stanley Cup final games, or they've played in Eastern or Western Conference final. Like, these guys have played in big games. So that way, when an Eklund or Bordeleau or Robins, they're struggling and they maybe something's not clicking, you can turn to one of those guys and say, hey, what do I do now? Or, get some confidence from those guys, or, have a guy to kind of lean on. So that way you're not having to kind of carry a franchise and kind of figure out how to play in the NHL at the same time. You can one step at a time, right?
Right. And honestly, like when you're saying carrying a franchise and learning how to play in the NHL, that kind of made me a little bit nervous because, that's what Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield are doing. And I know JD Young has some questions for me about our top line and how exciting they are. And I have some questions for him about Erik Karlsson's phenomenal season, not on the Ottawa Senators. And that's all coming up in just one moment. All right, let's talk about my small adult sons.
You have
Kirby
a
Dach
couple big, and Slafkovsky is a big boy too. But
yes.
I mean, I talked about it on my show yesterday and how I like what the Canadiens are doing, right? You have your three guys who are going to be kind of the face of your franchise moving forward, and Slafkovsky will eventually kind of jump in there as well too. I like how Martin St. Louis is like, okay, you are my three best players. Go on the front line. I'm going to give you guys all the prime opportunities, but they've also kind of earned it too, right? That they've been through it. We saw Cole Caufield having to play on the fourth line last year, which I'm sure was a super fun experience. I don't know if you guys have banned that or blocked that, full like Men in Black, wipe that out of your mind.
Absolutely. You click the thing that looks like a pen.
Yeah, and it's gone. So how do you like with Martin St. Louis, what do you think he's done with these young guys to kind of instill that confidence, like, again, learning to play in the NHL, but at the same time balancing you're carrying the franchise at some point, right?
Right. So I think the key thing about all three of these players, and it's something that this organization has kind of, as their draft decisions and their trading decisions have come to light, they prize hockey intelligence, hockey IQ, and that's something that Martin St. Louis can work with. Right? You can have all the skill in the world, but if your decision making on the ice is abysmal, you're not going to get too far. So I think the fact that all three of these players can see plays ahead, they can create in their minds, they can create space, they can create opportunities, they can foresee situations. Their intelligence is sort of on a similar level. Putting them together made a lot of sense. Like, I honestly, it wouldn't have crossed my mind before to put Kirby Dach on that line because the focus in this market was all his failings as a center, right? Like, we knew that he's picked third overall. He's drafted as a center. He's played as a center. We wanted him to be the second line center. And so there's obviously a lot that goes with that, right? So like the focus was like one day it was like, well, his faceoffs aren't that much. And then so the argument was like the faceoffs aren't as important. You can have some other guy take them on the same line or something like that, which is true. Like I like we all felt that the face-off issue was overblown, and Jeff Gorton himself felt that the face-off issue was overblown. Just so you know, he was on a podcast and he said it. I think the things like we were focusing on were the things that he wasn't living up to as a center, right? But then you take those and you put them in a winger, right? That creativity, that defensive responsibility, the amount of space he has to work with as a winger, having been, groomed and trained as a center, like that has really brought out a lot in him. So the Canadiens kind of what they've done is they've taken all of these players' hockey IQs and sort of try to cultivate that. At the same time, they have a skills and development coach at the same time to work on them with the little things, the physical skills and things like that. But Martin St. Louis is so good with the hockey IQ, the hockey mind, the hockey decision making, the reads. He calls them the reads. I want my players to make reads. So that's something that I think the Canadiens have been really good at. And I think one thing that sort of makes it so clear to me is the way that he dealt with Cole Caufield, right? Like he said that, you're struggling to put the puck in the net, your confidence is gone. Like, how can you think hockey with no confidence? And I think that's something that Nick Suzuki has been phenomenal at. Like, you look at that team's offensive numbers. Clearly, they're carrying the team. There's not a whole lot else out there. And then you look at their defensive play, and I think that their defensive play has been sacrificed completely. But if you balance it out with secondary scoring,
defense is dumb anyway.
Defense should be optional.
Yes.
Their defensive play isn't that great. Like, you'll see them getting hemmed in their own zone and things like that. So you can kind of tell that their offensive creativity is being actively cultivated. And I don't necessarily think, like, both Kirby Dach and Nick Suzuki, they've played center for a long time. They do have defensive responsibility. And Cole Caufield isn't as bad as people think. Like, he's able to do a back check, for example, but they do get hemmed in their own zone. So I think that that's sort of the fact that they take the toughest minutes, they play the toughest competition, and then they're also expected to do all the scoring. So they are a delight to watch. And I honestly, the Kirby Dach experiment has gone really, really well. When he was first put on the wing, people had questions, but he proved that he's really, really good up there. And his underlying numbers are phenomenal, right? He's turned out to be such a good acquisition for Montreal. And then, like, if you just consider if Slafkovsky and some of these other players that they either drafted this past year or will draft in 2023 are going to make up their second and third lines. You've got Philip Mayshar, who can be a top six winger. You've got guys, we're saying Owen Beck ceiling a second line center, but then there's guys that the Canadiens could easily pick in the top 10 this upcoming year that could be centers. So, like, I feel like their top six, once it's set, that defensive issue isn't going to be so much anymore, because the player, like the Habs, are going to be able to roll enough lines that they'll spread out the tough assignments, right? So I'm not too worried about that. But I think the way that they've approached it is essentially leaned into hockey IQ. They know these players are skilled, so they're cultivating that on the ice, like in practices and in development sessions and things like that. But then in games, like Martin St. Louis is really encouraging them to think 2 steps ahead. And for me, it's working out. So if he can replicate that with a lot of other players on the team, I think it'd be phenomenal. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened with Mike Hoffman, but not everybody,
Sharks legend,
even
Mike
Martin
Hoffman.
Sharks legend,
Sharks
Mike
legend.
Yeah, but not everybody can do that.
I think it's interesting, with Martin St. Louis, it's not what can't you do, but what can you do? Okay, here's what you could do. Let me put you in the best position to succeed. And I think we need more coaches like that. How many times do you just see guys kind of, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, and it just kind of ruins a player's confidence. And like you said, Cole Caufield, what does he do? He's small and he scores goals. Okay, let me put you on a line with Kirby Dach, who's like 3 feet taller than you, and go have fun, right?
It's so fun.
The pictures.
Be small and score goals.
Yes. Yeah, like I love that from St. Louis. Is just like, okay, what can you do for me, and let me put you in a position to succeed. And I think that's, especially when you have a young, young nucleus like this, that's what you love to see. So
yes. So I want to ask you about, some of the players I love on the Sharks. For example, Erik Karlsson having a wonderful year, not on the Ottawa Senators. And I want to give you like 2 minutes to talk about William Eklund and say whatever you want about him.
All right, I'll start with Karlsson. So Erik Karlsson this year has come out and has just been a man possessed this year. I don't know how else to explain it. He is, at one point this year, he had when the offense was kind of still struggling to get going, he had accounted for 50% of these Sharks points. So like I think the Sharks had like 20 goals and he would have 12 points on those 20 goals type of situation where he was generating the entire offense. And it's been able to kind of spread around a little bit. But I think the big thing for him is the pecking order in the defense is not clear, right? It was, for years, it was kind of this dueling banjo thing between Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns, who kind of gets Brent Burns would get the kind of power play 1 minutes and kind of get all the first crack at everything. And now it's Erik Karlsson's show, right? It's Erik Karlsson and then kind of everybody else on the blue line. And Erik Karlsson gets as much power play time as he wants. He gets, as much, 5-on-5 time. Erik Karlsson gets to play as much as he wants, basically, right? And I think an interesting thing with David Quinn is you've seen with his practice where he's been giving Erik Karlsson a lot of maintenance days, and not trying to grind him out, especially because he has to carry the load for the Sharks so much. But he's fully healthy. He's super engaged. And it's just a pleasure to watch him kind of do his thing, especially on the power play where he is the catalyst for this Sharks power play. And we saw a little bit of it tonight of him just kind of, then the way the Sharks power play too, where it's not so much like, okay, Erik Karlsson, you're at the point and then you're along the blue line, go do stuff. Logan Couture was playing the point for on one of the Sharks' first power play for a good minute, while Erik Karlsson was kind of down along the half wall or playing the bumper. Just how creative these guys are, and they just kind of interchange. And Erik Karlsson again, just kind of the catalyst of doing that, and he's just so much fun to watch when he's on. So we'll see how long it lasts, how long he can stay healthy. But right now, I'm enjoying every second of Erik Karlsson. Just hopefully Norris winning Erik Karlsson this year. How great would that be?
It's honestly been it's interesting, when you allow those players that have that creativity and that skill to just do what they want. Imagine doing that with somebody like Andrei Markov or PK Subban. I just having that creativity and that freedom to kind of run your own show. Obviously, he's earned it, right?
Yeah, you have to earn it. You can't just let some, Matt Benning isn't out there doing the same thing, right? But it's like you said, David Quinn, he kind of lets these guys. I saw your face too when I said Logan Couture was running the point. You're just kind of like that doesn't make sense, right? Normally that wouldn't make sense, but it works because these guys have kind of played together for so long. And with Erik Karlsson kind of being the trigger man for everything, he's going to, most of the time he's going to make the right decision to put people in a position to succeed. So
that's awesome. All right. Time for you to talk about your small adult son / large adult son, William Eklund. Take it away.
Yes, William Eklund. So I know there's a lot of Sharks fans who are already worried because he hasn't been kind of lighting up. He made the NHL out of last year, got to play his 9 games, and they sent him back to Sweden. He had an abysmal season in Sweden, and he on a terrible, kind of almost how the Canadiens were last year, where it was just front office issues, players put in the wrong spot, almost kind of like Cole Caufield last year, right? Where he's put in the wrong spot. He's asked, you have a general manager's getting fired, coach is getting fired, kind of the same type of thing, right? He's over here, he's playing the AHL right now, and kind of like how the Canadiens, you have Caufield and Suzuki. Right now, it's Eklund and Bordeleau playing top line minutes together, and they've been doing well. Barracuda, they're not lighting up the scoreboards, but the rookies for the Barracuda have been kind of the play drivers and the scoring guys. And William Eklund's been a joy to watch. You can see that creativity that we were talking about with Suzuki and Kirby Dach and Cole Caufield. Of same thing with kind of Bordeleau and Eklund, where they just think the game much differently. And you can see how well they work off together. And then they have Tristen Robins, who has one of the fastest shots. He can get a shot off lightning quick. So the 3 of those guys playing together has been great. And hopefully one day that line just kind of picks itself up and puts itself in the NHL, and I don't have to watch Nick Bonino on the power play anymore.
Listen, Nick Bonino skated circles around some Canadiens tonight.
Nick Bonino and Matt Nieto on the power play in the year of our Lord 2022. Yes.
So. What will they think of next? But I can tell sometimes, just from your tweets, when you're watching the Sharks and when you're watching the Barracuda, you can tell the joy, the level of joy is very different. And my level of joy, honestly, after that abysmal, really boring, really dull game, has perked up just by talking to you for half an hour, JD. So thank you so much for coming on the show. And please tell our lovely listeners where they can find you, your work, and if you have any fun stickers in the pipeline.
No fun stickers in the pipeline. I've been very busy with everything else, unfortunately. So yeah, I might have to kind of dig up the sticker shop again. But yeah, it's Too much writing, too much podcasts, all that fun stuff. So, but yeah, you can find, of course, the show Locked On Sharks wherever you get podcasts, and of course on YouTube, and the show Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can find me at my fry hole. I also write a lot for Fear the Fin. Somehow I got suckered into that. So yeah, you can see a lot of stuff on there. A lot of people liked my headline for the I did the Canadiens preview, so a lot of people liked my headline for that. So
What was the headline? I saw that you posted that you were comparing the rebuilds. Hold on a second.
no, you have to look at the Fear the Fin one. Yeah, so
I am.
she's gonna look
Because
at
I
it.
follow you, the Locked On Sharks Instagram, and then I know you posted. All right, hold on. I'm going to read this to
She's
our
looking
listeners. Sharks at Canadiens. Saviez-vous que Vlasic est de Montréal? All right.
I was told it was an incredible headline, so
It's perfect. It is.
Yes.
It's really perfect, especially for our listeners. And so thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. You know, again, I knew this game was going to be awful, so I did want to have like a pick-me-up after that, just not just even for my listeners, for me. So I really appreciate this time. And if you, obviously, if you like this podcast, please subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. You'll find me at The Active Stick. You'll find Scott at Scott Matla. You can email us
She's
mailbag
on
questions.
vacation and better not be doing work, Scott. We will bully you.
He's gonna get yelled at, I think, again. He's
Mhm.
incapable of not working. But if you want to find him pretending to be on vacation, he's at Scott Matla. You can also email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com and leave us mailbag questions in our YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you tomorrow.